The kitchen counter was cold under my palms, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones on a February morning when the heat hasn't quite kicked in yet. I pressed the heels of my hands into the dough, folding and pushing, the rhythm as familiar as breathing. 40 years I'd been making bread in this kitchen. 40 years of flour dust settling into the grout between tiles, of yeast blooming in warm water, of loaves cooling on the wire rack by the window. The window Ed installed himself, cursing the measurements twice before getting it right. Steam curled up from my coffee mug, catching the early light. 7:15. The house was quiet except for the creak of floorboards overhead. Jason's room. My son's room, though calling it that felt strange now. He was 34, not 14. The footsteps moved from bed to bathroom, heavy and unhurried. No job to rush to, hadn't been one in 18 months. I shaped the dough into a ball, set it in the bowl, covered it with the dish towel Ed's mother had embroidered. Blue flowers along the edge, faded now. Everything in this house had a history. Every object had been chosen, placed, lived with. The bungalow wasn't large. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, kitchen and living room that flowed together in that open way houses did in the 80s. But it was ours. Mine and Ed's. We'd scraped together the down payment, painted every wall ourselves, planted the garden out back when Jason was still in diapers. Ed had been gone 5 years. Heart attack in the garage, quick and clean, the way he would have wanted if you'd asked him. I found him slumped against his workbench, wrench still in his hand. Sometimes I still heard his voice in the quiet moments. This house is ours, Nor. No one takes it. The stairs groaned as Jason came down. I glanced at the clock, 7:30, earlier than usual. He shuffled into the kitchen in gray sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days, hair sticking up on one side. His eyes found the stove first. "Morning," I said, cracking eggs into the pan. He grunted, pulled out a chair, dropped into it with the weight of someone who'd been awake for hours instead of minutes. His phone was already in his hand, thumb scrolling. I scrambled the eggs, added a pinch of salt, slid them onto a plate with 2 pieces of toast, set it in front of him. He didn't look up. "Thanks." I poured myself more coffee and sat across from him. Through the doorway, I could see into the living room. The new gaming console box was still there, half shoved behind the couch. Sleek black cardboard, expensive logo. He'd brought it home 3 days ago. When I'd asked about rent, he'd promised $500 last month, and the month before that, he'd said he was waiting on a check. Sure. The check that would pay for a $700 console. Jason ate in silence, still scrolling. I watched him over the rim of my mug. When had his face gotten so set? The softness of boyhood was long gone, replaced by a jaw that clenched when he concentrated, lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting at screens. He looked like Ed around the eyes. That was the hardest part. He set his fork down, leaned back, still looking at his phone. "Mom, I've been thinking." I waited. "It's time you moved out." The coffee was halfway to my mouth. I set the mug down slowly, carefully, watching for the smile that would mean he was joking. It didn't come. "This place is too big for you anyway," he continued, scrolling past something on his screen, thumb flicking upward in that absent way people do when they're only half present. "You don't need 3 bedrooms. All these stairs, the yard. It's a lot of work. You're not getting any younger." I blinked. "Jason?" "I could use the space," he said, finally looking up. His expression was matter-of-fact, like he'd just suggested we switch brands of laundry detergent. "You could get a nice apartment. Something easier to manage, you know. 1 floor, no maintenance. I'll take over the house. Fair trade." The word fair hung in the air between us. "You're serious," I said. Not a question. He shrugged. "Yeah, I mean, think about it. It makes sense." I thought about it. I thought about the mortgage Ed and I paid off 10 years early, scrimping and saving, skipping vacations. I thought about the property taxes I'd been paying alone since he died. I thought about the grocery bills, the utility bills, the Wi-Fi that Jason complained wasn't fast enough. I thought about 18 months of I'm looking mom and the market's tough and just a little longer. "When?" I asked quietly. "When what? When do you want me to move out?" He waved a hand. "I don't know. Whenever. Soon, though. I've got some friends who might want to move in, help with costs." Help with costs. The house was paid off. The only costs were taxes and utilities. But I didn't say that. I stood up, picked up my plate even though I'd barely touched the eggs. "I need to think about it," I said. "Sure, yeah. No rush. He was already looking back at his phone, the conversation over in his mind. Just, start looking at places. I walked out the back door without answering, letting the screen door slap shut behind me. The cold hit me immediately. I was still in my cardigan and slippers, but I didn't go back in. The backyard stretched out in front of me, small and square, bordered by a chain-link fence that was leaning slightly to the left. The vegetable garden Ed had tended so carefully was gone now, overgrown with weeds and wild grass that came up past my knees. I'd let it go after he died. Couldn't bear to touch it at first, and then it seemed too late to reclaim. I stood there in the weeds, arms wrapped around myself, and let the cold seep in. The sky was winter white, the trees bare. A cardinal landed on the fence post, bright red against the gray, and cocked its head at me. Ed used to say cardinals were good luck. I didn't feel lucky. It's time you moved out. My son. My boy. The baby I'd rocked at 3 a.m, the toddler who'd cried when I left him at preschool, the teenager who'd sulked but still came to me when his girlfriend broke his heart. When had he become this? When had I become the inconvenience, the obstacle between him and the space he wanted? The cardinal flew away. I went back inside. Jason was gone, back upstairs. The gaming console hummed from the living room, controller abandoned on the couch cushion, game paused on the screen. I stood in the kitchen and looked around, really looked, at the space I'd inhabited for 4 decades, the scratches on the linoleum from moving the table, the slight discoloration on the wall where Ed's coffee maker used to sit. The drawer where I kept the important papers. I opened it. Beneath the stack of bills and the old checkbook and the instruction manual for the dishwasher we'd replaced in 2003, I found the folder. Dark blue, worn at the edges. I pulled it out and sat down at the table. The property deed was on top. Nora Elaine Pruitt, just my name. Ed had insisted on that after his father's will had tied his mother up in probate for 2 years. Put it in your name, Nor, he'd said, clean and simple, no mess. I'd argued it should be both of us, but he'd been adamant, and after he died, I'd been grateful. No probate, no mess, just mine. The house was mine. I sat there for a long time, fingertips resting on the paper, feeling the raised texture of the seal. Upstairs, Jason's music started up, bass thumping through the ceiling, something with a lot of cursing. I didn't move. I just sat and thought and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet, but something colder, clearer. This house is ours, Nor. No one takes it. Okay, Ed, I whispered to the empty kitchen. Okay. The law office was on 3rd Street, a small brick building wedged between a dry cleaner and a tax service. I'd been here before 5 years ago, when Ed's estate needed sorting. The receptionist was the same, Helen, mid-60s, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She looked up when I walked in, and recognition flickered across her face. Mrs. Pruitt, she said, smiling. It's been a while. It has. I returned the smile, kept my voice light. I was hoping to speak with someone about selling a house. Her eyebrows went up just slightly. Of course. Let me see if Mark's available. She disappeared down the hall, and I sat in one of the waiting room chairs, hands folded in my lap. The office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. A fish tank burbled in the corner, the filter humming. I watched the fish circle, little orange things mindless and content, and wondered if I was making a mistake. Then I thought about Jason's face when he'd said it's time you moved out, that casual certainty, and decided I wasn't. Mrs. Pruitt? Mark appeared in the hallway, same as I remembered. Mid-50s, graying at the temples, reading glasses perched on his head. He'd handled Ed's paperwork with quiet efficiency, no unnecessary sympathy. I'd appreciated that. Come on back. His office was small and neat, diplomas on the wall, family photos on the desk. He gestured to a chair and I sat, smoothing my skirt. He settled behind the desk, folding his hands. Helen said you're looking to sell a property? The house on Maple Avenue, I said. The one my husband and I owned. The one I still own. He nodded slowly. And you're sure about this? I've never been more certain of anything. A pause. He studied me not unkindly. May I ask why? I could have lied. Could have said I was downsizing, simplifying, all the things people say when they're selling a home. Instead, I told him the truth, or enough of it. My son lives there. He's 34, hasn't worked in over a year, doesn't pay rent. He told me it's time I moved out so he can have the space. Mark's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Understanding, maybe? I see. The house is solely in my name. I checked. It is, he confirmed, pulling up something on his computer. I have the file here. Transferred to you outright after your husband's passing. You're the sole owner. So I can sell it. You can absolutely sell it. He leaned back in his chair. Walk me through what you're thinking. I'd rehearsed this on the drive over. I want to sell quickly and quietly. I don't want a long, drawn-out process, and I prefer to handle showings and paperwork when my son isn't home. Does he know you're planning this? No. Mark was quiet for a moment, then, Mrs. Pruitt, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your own property, but I do want to make sure you understand the implications. If your son is living there, he may have tenant rights depending on— He doesn't pay rent, I interrupted. He never has. There's no lease, no agreement, he's a guest. Even so, eviction laws, I'm not evicting him. I'm selling the house. He'll have time to find somewhere else. Mark studied me again, then nodded. All right, let's talk a process. We spent the next hour going over everything. Appraisal, listing, showings, offers. He recommended a realtor he'd worked with before, a woman named Denise who specialized in quick sales. 30 days was possible, he said, maybe 45 depending on the market. I told him 30 would be ideal. Can you give him notice? Mark asked. Legally, you should. I will, I said. When the time is right. He didn't push, just nodded and made notes. By the time I left, I had an appointment scheduled for the appraisal and Denise's number in my phone. My hands were shaking as I walked to the car, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like control. I drove home past Riverside Park, the one where I used to take Jason when he was little. The swings were empty, chains hanging limp in the cold. I remembered pushing him, his little legs kicking, his laughter bright and unguarded. Higher, Mama! Higher! I remembered thinking I'd do anything for him. Anything to keep him safe, happy, loved. When did protecting him turn into enabling him? When did love become fear? Fear of his disappointment, his anger, his withdrawal? I'd been so afraid of losing him that I'd let him take and take and take until there was nothing left to give, until he thought he was entitled to the one thing I had left. The house came into view as I turned onto Maple Avenue. Small, beige, ordinary, but mine. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, and let myself feel it. The anger I'd been holding down, the hurt, the sheer audacity of it's time you moved out. I felt it all, and then I tucked it away. I'd need it later. For now, I needed to be calm, strategic. Inside, Jason was in the kitchen, microwaving something that smelled like artificial cheese. He glanced at me as I came in. Where were you? Out, I said, hanging up my coat. Errands. He grunted, took his food into the living room. I heard the TV click on, some action movie with explosions. I stood in the kitchen looking at the counter where I'd kneaded bread that morning and thought about the appraisal appointment in 3 days. Thursday. Jason usually went out with his friends on Thursdays, or said he did. I'd make sure he was gone. That evening, I made spaghetti. Jason came down when I called, sat across from me and complained about the Wi-Fi speed, said it kept dropping during his game, cost him a match. You could call the provider, I said mildly. I did. They said it's fine on their end. Probably the router. It's old. I'll look into it. He nodded, twirling spaghetti on his fork. So, did you think about what I said? About moving? I took a sip of water. I'm thinking about it. Good. Because, I wasn't trying to be a jerk or anything. It's just practical. Practical. Right. When are you planning to start looking for work again? I asked. He sighed, the kind of sigh that said, here we go again. The market's bad, Mom. I've been applying, but no one's hiring. Where have you applied? Places? I don't know. Lots of places. What kind of places? Jesus, Mom. He set his fork down. I don't need the 3rd degree, okay? I'm handling it. I nodded, picked up my plate even though I wasn't finished. Okay. He went back to eating, back to his phone. I rinsed my plate in the sink and thought, very clearly, sure, Jason, you're handling it. The sarcasm felt good, even unspoken. Sharp and clean, a little blade I could hold inside where he couldn't see it. I dried my hands and went to my bedroom, closed the door, and called Denise. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Hi, this is Nora Pruitt. Mark Alvarez gave me your number. Oh, yes. Her voice was bright, professional. He mentioned you might call. You're looking to sell a property? I am, on Maple Avenue. 3-bedroom, 1 bath, paid off. I'd like to list it as soon as possible. Wonderful. Let me pull up the details. Can we schedule a time for me to come see it? Thursday, I said. Morning, 10 o'clock. Perfect. I'll be there. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed looking at the photo on the nightstand. Ed and me on our wedding day, impossibly young, grinning like idiots. His arm around my waist, my hand on his chest. We'd been so sure of everything back then, so certain we'd build a life that mattered. I'm doing this, I told the photo. I'm really doing it. Ed smiled back, frozen in time, and didn't argue. Thursday morning arrived cold and bright. I was up at 6, made coffee, waited. Jason's alarm went off at 8. I heard it through the wall, the blare of his phone, then silence. He'd hit snooze. At 8:15 he finally got up, shuffled to the bathroom, shuffled back. By 9 he was downstairs, rumpled and squinting. You going out today? I asked, keeping my tone casual. He shrugged. Maybe. Tyler said something about meeting up. Tyler, I'd met him once 2 years ago, unemployed then, probably still was now. You should go, I said. It's a nice day. Get some air. He looked at me suspiciously, but I kept my face neutral. After a moment, he nodded, grabbed a granola bar, and headed back upstairs. I waited. At 9:30, I heard the shower. At 9:45, his bedroom door closed. At 9:50, his car started in the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as he backed out, tires crunching on gravel, and disappeared down the street. Then I exhaled. The appraiser arrived at 10 on the dot. Leah, she'd said on the phone. Early 30s, professional blazer, tablet in hand. I met her at the door with a smile. Mrs. Pruitt? Please call me Nora. She returned the smile, warm and efficient. Great, let's take a look. I led her through the house, room by room. She took photos, made notes, commented on the original hardwood floors and the crown molding Ed had installed in the living room. In the kitchen, she paused, running her hand along the countertop. These are in great shape, original. We replaced them about 15 years ago. Laminate, but good quality. She nodded, making notes. We moved through the bedrooms, mine first, neat and sparse, then the guest room that no one had used in years. Finally, Jason's room. I opened the door and stepped back. Clothes on the floor, energy drink cans on the nightstand, gaming setup dominating the desk, monitors and keyboards in a tangle of cords. The bed was unmade, sheets half on the floor. It smelled like old laundry and stale air. Leah stepped in carefully, taking it all in. She didn't comment, just took her photos and made her notes. But when she looked at me, there was a question in her eyes. Is the house occupied? She asked politely. Not for long, I said. She nodded, didn't press. We finished the walkthrough in the backyard, overgrown and untended, but she said it had good bones, potential. People liked big yards. When we were done, she stood in the driveway with me, scrolling through her tablet. I'll have the full report to you and Mark by tomorrow, she said. But preliminarily, I'd say you're looking at 240, maybe 250, depending on the market. More than I'd expected. The house had been worth 180 when Ed died. I kept my face calm. That's good to know. It's a solid property, Nora. Great location, good condition. It should move fast. Thank you. She left and I went back inside. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like it had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. I walked through the rooms again, slower this time, letting myself see it the way Leah had. The way a buyer would. It was a good house. A home. Someone would love it, just not Jason. The listing went live on Monday. Denise called me that morning, enthusiastic and brisk. We've already got 3 showings scheduled, she said. 1 this afternoon, 2 tomorrow. Can you make sure the house is clear? I will. Jason was predictably absent. He'd started spending more time out, mornings at Tyler's, afternoons God knows where. He came home for dinner, disappeared back upstairs, and didn't ask questions. I moved through my days in a haze of controlled adrenaline, packing small things, photo albums, kitchen items I didn't use often, Ed's tools from the garage, into boxes I hid in the basement, just in case, just to be ready. The first showing was at 2, a young couple, mid-20s, holding hands and whispering excitedly as they walked through. The woman kept saying, "Oh my God, it's perfect," and the man took photos of everything. They lingered in the kitchen, talking about where they'd put a breakfast table, and I watched from the driveway, feeling something twist in my chest. Not regret. Something else. Bittersweet, maybe. The knowledge that this place would go on without me, that other people would make memories here, that life would continue in these rooms long after I was gone. The couple left smiling, thanking Denise profusely. She walked them to their car, then came back to me. "They're interested," she said. "I can tell." Good. The second showing was a middle-aged woman, recently divorced, looking for a fresh start. She walked through quietly, touching the walls, the door frames, like she was testing the feel of the place. In the backyard, she stood for a long time, looking at the overgrown garden. "What was here?" she asked. "Vegetables, my husband's project." She nodded. "I could bring it back." "I think you could." She didn't make an offer, but Denise said she was thinking about it. The third showing was the one that mattered. An older man, 60s, graying hair and kind eyes. He introduced himself as George, shook my hand firmly, and walked through the house with the slow deliberation of someone who'd done this before. In the living room, he paused at the built-in bookshelf Ed had made. "This is beautiful work," he said, "my husband's." He had skill. He did. In the backyard, George stood, where the divorced woman had stood, looking at the garden space. "I'm downsizing," he said quietly. "My wife passed last year. Big house, too many memories. But I still want a place with good energy, you know? Somewhere I can start over." I knew. "I could fix this up," he said, gesturing to the weeds. "Tomatoes, maybe, some herbs. That would be nice." He turned to me and his eyes were sad but clear. "Why are you selling?" The question surprised me. Most people didn't ask. I could have lied. Downsizing, same as him. But something about his face, the way he asked, made me tell the truth. "My son lives here. He told me it was time I moved out." George's eyebrows went up. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at me. Then, "And you decided to beat him to it." "Something like that." He smiled, small and knowing. "Good for you." The offer came in 2 days later. Full asking price, cash, 30-day close. Denise called me at noon, breathless and excited. "Nora, it's George. He wants it. He's ready to move fast. Can you close in 30 days? I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Jason had told me to move out, and looked at the paperwork Denise had emailed. The numbers swam in front of me, but the meaning was clear. This was real. This was happening. "Yes," I said, "I can close in 30 days. "Fantastic. I'll draw up the contracts." I hung up and sat in the silence. Upstairs, Jason's music thumped through the ceiling. Some rap song, bass rattling the light fixtures. He had no idea. No idea his world was about to shift, that the ground beneath him was already gone. I pulled out a pen, clicked it open, and signed my name on the acceptance form Denise had sent. Nora Elaine Pruitt. The ink was dark against the white paper, permanent and final. The house seemed to shift around me, the walls exhaling. I sat very still, feeling it. The weight lifting, the path clearing, the future opening up like a door I'd forgotten existed. For the first time since Ed died, I felt like myself. Not Jason's mother, not the widow, just Nora. And Nora had work to do. The boxes came from the hardware store on 3rd Street, flat-packed and smelling like cardboard and dust. I bought 20 of them, loaded them into the trunk of my Civic, and drove home while Jason was out doing whatever Jason did with his days. The boxes went into the basement, stacked behind the old holiday decorations and the broken lawnmower Ed had always meant to fix, out of sight. I became a thief in my own house. That's what it felt like anyway, sneaking around, packing belongings in increments, so small they wouldn't be noticed. Photo albums first, the ones from the hall closet that no one looked at anymore. Then the kitchen items I rarely used. The good china, the serving platters, the mixer Ed bought me for our 10th anniversary. I wrapped everything in newspaper, labeled the boxes with innocuous titles, holiday, storage, donations, and carried them down to the basement after. Jason went to bed. He noticed nothing. His world had contracted to the size of his bedroom, his screens, his games. He came down for meals I made, grunted thanks, and disappeared again. Some nights I heard him laughing through the wall, talking to someone on his headset, his voice animated in a way it never was with me. I'd stand in the hallway and listen, remembering when that laugh had been for me, when I'd been the one who could make him smile, who knew his secrets, who mattered. I packed Ed's tools next, the wrenches and hammers and levels, all organized in the red toolbox he'd been so proud of. I ran my fingers over the handles, worn smooth from his grip, and felt the ache settle deep in my chest. Ed would have hated this. Not the selling. He was practical, would have understood, but the why. The fact that our son had become someone who'd look his mother in the eye and tell her to leave. What did we do wrong? I asked the empty garage. The tools didn't answer. 3 weeks. That's how long I had between signing the acceptance and closing day. 21 days to dismantle a life, to pack 4 decades into boxes and suitcases and garbage bags. I found an apartment online, 2nd floor, 1 bedroom, 10 minutes from here, and put down a deposit without telling anyone. The landlord, a woman named Patricia, asked if I was sure I didn't want to see it first. I'm sure, I said. Okay, hun, move-in date? 1st of the month. 2 days after closing, enough time to clean, to hand over the keys, to walk away. I packed my clothes next, folding sweaters and slacks into suitcases I kept in the back of my closet. Jason never came into my room, hadn't in years, so the risk was minimal. Still, my heart hammered every time I heard his footsteps on the stairs, every time his door opened. I was dismantling his world and he didn't even know it. The guilt came in waves. Late at night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I'd think about 8-year-old Jason helping Ed build the deck, 16-year-old Jason sulking, but still showing up for family dinner, 22-year-old Jason promising he'd figure it out, just give him time. I'd given him time, 12 years of time, and he'd taken every minute, every dollar, every piece of me I'd offered, and decided it still wasn't enough. It's time you moved out. The guilt would recede then, replaced by something colder. Clarity. I packed the living room last, the books, the knickknacks, the framed photos from the mantel. I left a few things out, enough to make the house look lived in for the final showings, but everything that mattered went into boxes. My life, distilled down to cardboard and packing tape. Denise called twice during those 3 weeks. Once to confirm the inspection had gone well, no major issues, just some minor electrical work George was willing to handle himself. Once to finalize the closing date, Friday, March 7th, 10 a.m. I marked it on the calendar with a small, neat X Jason asked about, the calendar on a Tuesday 2 weeks before closing. He'd come down for breakfast, seen me writing something, and leaned over my shoulder. What's that? Just an appointment, I said, closing the calendar. For what? Doctor's office, routine checkup. He accepted this without question, poured himself cereal, and ate it standing at the counter while scrolling through his phone. I watched him trying to reconcile this man with the boy I remembered. Where had it happened? Where was the moment he'd stopped being my son and started being a stranger who lived in my house and demanded I leave it? Maybe there was no single moment. Maybe it had been gradual, a series of small choices, his and mine, that led us here. Him choosing the easy path, me choosing to let him. Him taking, me giving, him expecting, me enabling, until the imbalance became so profound that he genuinely believed he was entitled to my home. I didn't hate him. That was the strange part. I was angry, yes, and hurt, but underneath it all was a deep, aching sadness. I'd failed him. Not by selling the house, by letting it get to this point. By making his life so comfortable, so free of consequences, that he'd never learn to stand on his own. Love wasn't supposed to look like this. Love was supposed to build people up, make them stronger. Instead, I'd weakened him. I'd been so afraid of him struggling that I'd removed every struggle. And in doing so, I'd removed every opportunity for growth. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Thursday, March 6th. One day before closing, I made pot roast for dinner the way Jason used to love when he was a kid. Potatoes and carrots and onions, slow cooked until the meat fell apart. The house smelled like comfort, like memory, like every Sunday dinner from his childhood. I set the table, 2 places, cloth napkins, the good water glasses, and called up the stairs. Jason, dinner. In a minute. Now, please. Something in my tone made him listen. I heard his headset hit the desk, heard his chair scrape back. He appeared at the top of the stairs, frowning. What's the occasion? Sit down. We need to talk. His frown deepened, but he came down, dropped into his usual chair. I served the pot roast, gave him the larger portion, poured water for both of us. Then I sat across from him and folded my hands on the table. "Jason," I said quietly, "the house has been sold." He'd been reaching for his fork. His hand stopped midair, hovered there for a moment, then lowered slowly. He stared at me. "What?" "I sold the house. Closing is tomorrow. You'll need to be out by Saturday morning." The silence stretched. I watched understanding move across his face in stages. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something sharper. He laughed, a short bark of sound that held no humor. "You're joking." I shook my head. "Mom." He set both hands flat on the table. "This isn't funny. It's not a joke. You can't just—" He stopped, started again. "You can't sell the house. I live here. You lived here. Past tense." His face changed, hardened. "This is my house. I grew up here. You can't just sell it out from under me." "It was never your house, Jason." My voice stayed level, calm. "It was mine. It is mine. For 23 more hours anyway. Then it belongs to George." "Who the hell is George?" "The man who bought it." Jason shoved back from the table, his chair scraping loud against the floor. He stood, paced to the window, paced back. His hands went to his hair, tugging. Where am I supposed to go? I'd prepared for this. I pulled an envelope from my pocket, set it on the table between us. "There's a check in there. $3,500. First month, last month, security deposit, and a little extra. I found an apartment for you. 1 bedroom, good area, available immediately. The address is written on the paper." He stared at the envelope like it was poisonous. "You're serious." "Completely. You can't do this." His voice was rising now, anger bleeding through the disbelief. "You can't just kick me out. Where am I supposed to— what am I supposed to—" "You're supposed to figure it out," I said, "like adults do." "I'm your son." "I know." The words came quietly, but they landed hard. "And I love you, Jason. I always will. But love doesn't mean letting you live here rent-free, bill-free, responsibility-free while you do nothing with your life." "I'm looking for work. Are you?" I leaned forward. "Really? Because I haven't seen you fill out an application in months. I haven't seen you leave the house except to hang out with Tyler. I haven't seen you try." His jaw clenched. "You don't know what it's like out there. The market? The market is fine, Jason. The problem isn't the market. The problem is you've gotten so comfortable here that you don't have to try." "So your solution is to make me homeless?" "You're not homeless. You have an apartment, you have money, you have options. What you don't have anymore is this house." He paced again, faster now, his movements jerky with anger. "I can't believe this. I can't believe you do this to me." "You told me to move out," I said. "Remember? You said it was time I found an apartment, that this place was too big for me. You said it made sense." That was different." "How?" "Because—" He stopped, mouth working, searching for an argument that wouldn't make him sound entitled. He didn't find one. "Because you're my mom." "Exactly." I stood, picked up my water glass. "I'm your mom. Not your landlord, not your maid, not your meal ticket. Your mom. And a good mom doesn't let her son drift through life without purpose, without goals, without consequences. A good mom prepares her child for the world. I didn't do that. I should have done it years ago." "So you're selling the house." His voice dripped sarcasm. "To teach me a lesson." "No. I'm selling the house because you told me to leave, and I decided you were right. It was time for a change. Just not the change you had in mind." His face flushed red. "You're unbelievable. You're actually—" He bit off the words, spun toward the stairs. "Jason." He stopped, didn't turn around. "The check is on the table. The apartment information is in the envelope. I'll help you pack if you want, or you can do it yourself. But by Saturday morning, you need to be gone." He didn't answer, just climbed the stairs, footsteps heavy, and slammed his bedroom door hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the muffled sounds of drawers being yanked open, belongings being thrown. The pot roast sat on the table, cooling and untouched. I wrapped it in foil and put it in the fridge. Then I washed the dishes, dried them, put them away. My hands were steady, my breathing was steady. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean, but underneath the emptiness was something solid, something that felt like bedrock. I'd done the right thing. It didn't feel good, but it felt true. That night I barely slept. I heard Jason moving around until 3 a.m., drawers slamming, closet doors banging, the occasional muttered curse. He was packing. Good. At some point the noises stopped and the house fell silent. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through tomorrow's schedule. Closing at 10. Final walkthrough with George at 11. Keys handed over by noon. Then home to supervise Jason's move out, assuming he hadn't already left. Would he speak to me? Probably not. Not tomorrow, maybe not for months. Maybe not ever. The thought sat heavy on my chest, a physical weight, but I didn't let myself spiral. I'd made my choice. He'd have to make his. At 6, I gave up on sleep and got up. Made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching the sun rise over the backyard. The weeds swayed in the morning breeze, gold-tipped and almost beautiful. George was going to fix that. George was going to plant tomatoes and herbs and bring the garden back to life. The house would be loved again. Footsteps on the stairs. I turned, expecting Jason, but he walked past the kitchen without looking at me. Headed straight for the front door, duffel bag in one hand, garbage bag in the other. His car keys jangled. "Jason," I said. He paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. "Did you take the check?" "Yeah." His voice was flat, scraped raw. "And the apartment information?" "Yeah." "If you need help moving?" "I don't." I wanted to say more, wanted to tell him I loved him, that this wasn't about punishment, that someday he'd understand, but the set of his shoulders told me he wouldn't hear it, not today. "Okay," I said quietly. He left. The door closed behind him, not a slam, just a solid click, and then his car started, pulled out of the driveway, disappeared down the street. I stood in the kitchen, coffee mug warming my hands, and let myself feel it. The loss, the grief, the terrible necessary weight of letting go. Then I checked the time, 7:15. I had 2 hours and 45 minutes before closing. I went upstairs to Jason's room. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and looked inside. He'd taken most of his clothes, his gaming equipment, the things that mattered to him, but the room was still a mess. Candy wrappers on the floor, empty energy drink cans on the nightstand, bed sheets tangled and half off the mattress. I stood there for a moment looking at the space my son had occupied and felt a flicker of anger. He couldn't even clean up after himself. Couldn't even show that much respect. I got garbage bags from under the sink and spent the next hour cleaning his room. Threw away the trash, stripped the bed, opened the windows to air out the stale smell. By the time I was done, the room looked like a guest room again. Neutral, empty, ready for someone else's memories. At 9:30, I changed into a dress, the navy one I'd worn to Ed's funeral. It felt appropriate somehow. I put on lipstick, combed my hair, looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back was older than I felt, lines around her eyes, gray threading through her hair, but her gaze was clear, steady. "Okay, Nora," I said to my reflection, "let's go." The title company was downtown, a modern building with too much glass and a lobby that echoed. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, found the office and checked in with the receptionist. George was already there, sitting in the waiting area with a folder on his lap. He stood when he saw me, smiled. "Nora." "George." We shook hands. His grip was warm, firm. Denise appeared from down the hall, clipboard in hand, all efficiency and bright smiles. "Ready to make this official?" We followed her to a conference room. Long table, uncomfortable chairs, a window overlooking the parking lot. The closing agent, a woman named Rita, walked us through the paperwork page by page. I signed where she indicated, initialed here and here, dated everything. George did the same. The whole process took 40 minutes. At 10:53, Rita smiled and said, "Congratulations. The house is officially yours, Mr. Caldwell." George shook my hand again. "Thank you, Nora. I'll take good care of it." "I know you will." Denise walked us out, chattering about what a smooth process it had been. How rare that was these days. In the lobby, George paused, turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Your son, did he move out?" I nodded. "This morning." "Good." He hesitated, then, "My daughter tried something similar a few years ago. Wanted me to sign the house over to her after my wife died, said I didn't need that much space. I told her no. She didn't speak to me for 6 months. Did she come around? Eventually, after she realized I wasn't going to cave. He smiled, sad but knowing. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for our kids is let them struggle. Hard lesson to learn. It is. You did the right thing. I wanted to believe him. Thank you. We said our goodbyes, and I walked to my car in the cold March sunlight. The keys to the house, my house, Ed's house, the house that had held 4 decades of life, were in my purse, ready to hand over at the final walkthrough. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, not starting the engine, just breathing. It was done. The house was sold. Jason was gone. The life I'd known was over. And I felt lighter than I had in years. The apartment was small and bright, second floor of a modest complex near Riverside Park. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, galley kitchen, living room, with a sliding door that opened onto a narrow balcony. Patricia, the landlord, met me there with the keys and a lease to sign. Quiet building, she said, leading me inside. Mostly retirees and young professionals. Laundry in the basement, parking spot included. You said you don't have much furniture? Not much, I confirmed. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Empty, it looked bigger than the photos suggested. Light poured through the balcony door, pooling on the floor. I walked through slowly, bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, imagining where things would go. My bed here, Ed's photo on the nightstand, the kitchen table by the window, books on the built-in shelf in the living room. It didn't feel like home yet, but it felt like possibility. I signed the lease, took the keys, and drove back to Maple Avenue one last time. George was meeting me at 11 for the final walkthrough, and I wanted a few minutes alone first, to say goodbye properly. The driveway was empty, Jason's car gone, his presence erased as if he'd never been there. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was silent, waiting. I walked through room by room, touching the walls, the door frames, the light switches. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the counter where I'd kneaded bread 5 weeks ago, where this whole thing had started. It's time you moved out. Okay, Jason, I whispered. I did. The doorbell rang at 11 exactly. George, punctual and smiling, with a tape measure in his hand. Mind if I take some measurements? I want to order furniture before I move in. Of course, the house is yours. We walked through together. He measured the living room, the bedrooms, asked questions about the wiring and the plumbing. In the backyard, he stood looking at the garden space again, hands in his pockets. I'm thinking tomatoes here, peppers here, maybe some basil along this edge. That sounds perfect. He glanced at me. You okay? I nodded. It's strange, leaving, but good strange. I get that. He turned back to the garden. My daughter asked me last week if I was sure about this place. Said it seemed like a lot of work for a man my age. He smiled. I told her that's exactly why I'm doing it. I've got years left in me. Might as well use them. I liked George. Liked that he was going to fill this house with life again, with purpose. You'll be happy here, I said. I think so. At 11:30, I handed over the keys, front door, back door, garage. George tucked them into his pocket, shook my hand one last time. Thank you again, Nora. Take care of it. I will. I walked to my car, got in, and didn't look back. The house on Maple Avenue disappeared in my rearview mirror, and I let it go. The next 3 weeks were a blur of unpacking and settling in. I hung curtains, arranged furniture, found spots for all the boxes I'd hidden in the basement. The apartment slowly transformed from generic rental to something that felt like mine. Not home yet, that would take time, but somewhere I could breathe. Jason texted once, 2 weeks after closing. Short, terse. I got a job. Warehouse. It's fine. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Proud of you. He didn't reply. I didn't expect him to, but the fact that he texted at all felt like something. A crack in the wall, maybe. A possibility of future reconciliation, even if it was years away. Or maybe not. Maybe he'd never forgive me. Maybe I destroyed our relationship permanently. I made peace with that uncertainty. I'd done what I thought was right, what I should have done years ago. The outcome was up to him now. One morning in April, I woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom window, warm and yellow. Spring had arrived while I wasn't paying attention. I made coffee, stood on the balcony in my bathrobe, and watched the world wake up. People walking dogs, kids waiting for the school bus, the ordinary rhythm of ordinary lives. A flyer had appeared in my mailbox the day before: Riverside Community Garden, volunteers needed. I tucked it on the counter, meaning to throw it away. But standing there in the spring light, coffee warming my hands, I thought about George planting tomatoes. About Ed's garden, overgrown and reclaimed by weeds. About the years I'd spent not gardening, not living, just existing in the in-between. I went inside, dug the flyer out from under the junk mail, and dialed the number. A woman answered, bright and friendly. Riverside Garden, this is Dolores. Hi, I saw your flyer. You need volunteers? Desperately. Do you have any gardening experience? Some. It's been a while. That's perfect. Can you come by Saturday morning? We're doing spring planting. I'll be there. Saturday morning, I showed up in old jeans and Ed's gardening gloves, the ones I'd kept when I packed his tools. Dolores turned out to be 70-ish, silver hair and a braid, dirt under her fingernails and a smile that took up her whole face. She put me to work immediately, weeding a plot, turning soil, planting seedlings that would be tomatoes by summer. My back ached, my knees protested, my hands remembered the rhythm. First time? Dolores asked, kneeling beside me to show me how to plant the seedlings properly. First time in a long time. What brought you here? I thought about it. I needed to start over. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Good a place as any. We worked side by side for 3 hours. Dolores told me about her kids, 3 daughters, all grown, all living out of state, and her late husband who'd loved fishing. I told her about Ed, about the house, about Jason. Not all of it, just enough. She listened without judgment, just nodded and handed me more seedlings. Kids are hard, she said finally. You love them so much you'd do anything for them, but sometimes anything is the problem. Yeah? You did right, though, letting him figure it out. How do you know? She smiled. Because you're here, planting tomatoes, starting over. That takes guts. We planted until noon, then Dolores invited me to coffee at the diner across the street. Over burnt coffee and mediocre pie, she told me about the garden's upcoming projects. A herb section, a butterfly garden, maybe some raised beds for seniors who couldn't kneel anymore. You should come back next week, she said. We could use someone with your energy. I'm 63. Like I said, energy. I laughed, surprised by the sound. When was the last time I'd laughed? Really laughed, not just smiled politely? Okay, I said. I'll come back. And I did. Every Saturday, then some Wednesdays, then whenever Dolores called and said she needed an extra pair of hands. The garden became my place, my people. I learned about heirloom tomatoes and companion planting and the best time to harvest basil. I met other volunteers, retired teachers and accountants and electricians, people starting over or just looking for community. I was both. June arrived hot and humid. The tomatoes in the community garden grew heavy on their vines, and Dolores taught me how to stake them properly. My apartment had taken on the feeling of home. Photos on the walls, Ed's quilt on my bed, books stacked on the coffee table. I'd started reading again, something I'd let fall away during the years of caretaking Jason. He texted occasionally short updates. Got promoted. Shift supervisor now. Moved to a better apartment. Tyler got married. Weird. I responded each time with encouragement, with pride, with the kind of support that didn't enable. He never said thank you, never acknowledged what I'd done or why, but the texts kept coming, sporadic and brief, and that felt like progress. One Saturday in July, Dolores and I sat on the bench at the edge of the garden, drinking water and watching the other volunteers work. You look different, she said suddenly. Different how? Happy, or maybe not happy, content. Like you know who you are again? I thought about that. Maybe I do. Good, she patted my knee. About damn time. We sat in comfortable silence watching the tomatoes sway in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance a cardinal called. Sharp and bright, Ed's good luck bird. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. This was my life now. Small and quiet and mine. August. The garden's harvest was in full swing, and Dolores enlisted me to help with the community. Distribution, boxes of vegetables for families who needed them, coordinated through the local food bank. I spent Wednesday afternoons sorting tomatoes and peppers and squash, packing them into boxes, loading them into cars. On one of those afternoons, a young woman came to pick up a box. Mid-20s, tired eyes, toddler on her hip. She thanked me 3 times, said the vegetables would help, that money was tight. "I know how that is," I said, handing her an extra bag of tomatoes. "It gets better." She smiled watery and grateful and left. I watched her go, thinking about all the times I'd struggled when Jason was young, when Ed's paycheck only stretched so far. We'd made it through. Not easily, not comfortably, but we'd made it. And those struggles had mattered. They'd taught us resilience, gratitude, the value of what we had. I'd robbed Jason of that. In trying to make his life easier, I'd made it meaningless. But he was learning now. Late, but learning. That evening I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and my phone. I scrolled through old photos, Jason as a baby, Jason on his first day of school, Jason graduating high school. The distance between that boy and the man who'd told me to move out felt impossible to measure. I texted him, "Thinking about you. Hope you're well." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Appeared again. Then, "I'm okay. You?" "I'm good. Really good." Another pause. Then, "That's good, Mom." Mom. He'd called me Mom, not in person, not in conversation, but he'd written it, sent it across the digital void that separated us. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. I set the phone down and looked out at the darkening sky, at the trees swaying in the summer breeze, at the lights coming on in windows across the complex. Life, continuing, moving forward, becoming. September brought cooler air and the first hints of fall. The garden started its seasonal slowdown, and Dolores began planning for winter crops, kale and spinach, things that could survive the frost. I helped turn the soil, add compost, prepare the beds. My hands were calloused now, strong. I'd lost weight without meaning to, gained muscle from all the digging and hauling. "You're glowing," Patricia said one morning when I ran into her checking the mailboxes. "New boyfriend?" I laughed. "New life. Even better." The apartment complex had a community bulletin board and someone had posted a flyer for a book club that met Thursday evenings. I took a photo of it, thought about it for 3 days, then sent an email to the organizer. They welcomed me immediately, sent me the reading list. I bought the first book, a novel about a woman reinventing herself after divorce, and started reading that night. I was doing it. Building a life that was mine, full of my choices, my interests, my people, not shaped by Jason's needs or Ed's absence, but by what I wanted, what I cared about, who I was. It felt radical. It felt right. October, the leaves turned gold and red, and I walked through Riverside Park on Sunday mornings with a travel mug of coffee and no particular destination. The swings where I'd pushed Jason weren't rusty anymore. Someone had refurbished them, painted them bright blue. I sat on one sometimes, feet dragging in the dirt, and watched families play. The ache was still there when I thought about Jason, about the distance between us, but it was quieter now, more like an old scar than an open wound. He texted on my birthday. "Happy birthday, Mom." I texted back, "Thank you, sweetheart." "How old are you now?" 64. Wow. Old. I smiled at the phone. It was the closest thing to a joke he'd made in months. "Getting there. You doing anything to celebrate?" I thought about lying, about saying I had plans so he wouldn't worry, but I didn't want to lie anymore. "Book club tonight. Dolores is bringing cake." A long pause. Then, "Who's Dolores?" "A friend from the community garden." "You're gardening?" "Every week." "Huh. Good for you, I guess." It wasn't much, but it was a conversation, real and present, and I held onto it like a lifeline. November. The garden was bare now, waiting for spring, but Dolores organized a potluck at her house. A harvest celebration, she called it, and I showed up with a loaf of bread. Homemade, kneaded that morning in my small kitchen, the same way I'd done it for 40 years. Dolores's house was warm and crowded, full of people I'd come to know over the past months. We ate and laughed and told stories, and someone asked how I'd ended up volunteering at the garden. I told them the truth. About Jason, about the house, about starting over at 63. They listened, and when I finished, a woman named Diane raised her glass. "To second acts," she said. "To second acts," we echoed and drank. Later, walking back to my car in the cold November dark, I felt it settle into my bones. peace. Not happiness exactly. That still came and went, but a deep, abiding sense that I was exactly where I needed to be. December. The year was ending. I bought a small Christmas tree for the apartment, decorated it with the ornaments Ed and I had collected over the years. I hung lights on the balcony, baked cookies, sent cards to people I'd met through the garden and the book club. Jason texted on Christmas Eve, "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Jason. I love you." "Love you too." 3 words. But they landed like a gift, like grace. I stood in my small kitchen on Christmas morning, kneading dough for cinnamon rolls, and looked out the window. The sun was rising, cold and bright, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The world felt enormous suddenly, full of possibility and second chances and the quiet courage it took to let go. I shaped the dough into rolls, set them to rise, and thought about roots and growth and the strange, painful beauty of starting over. Outside, a cardinal landed on the balcony railing, bright red against the gray morning. It looked at me through the glass, tilted its head, then flew away. Ed's good luck bird. I smiled and kept kneading, my hands sure and steady, ready for whatever came next.